Hi, this is Charles Hoskinson broadcasting live from warm, sunny Colorado. Always warm, always sunny, sometimes Colorado. So, from time to time, news items come up on the internets, and it's always nice to opine a little bit about it. One of the things we always talk about is midnight fixes it, midnight fixes it. So, I always like making videos like this. We can talk a little bit about where the world is going and what we need to do. Cold card hardware wallet flaw linked to $70 million Bitcoin theft in 41 minutes. An attacker drained 1,196 Bitcoin addresses in 41 minutes for about 1,000 Bitcoin worth, about 70 million at the time. Galaxy Research mapped the suite and tied it to a firmware flaw in Cold Card. So basically, back in 2021, they screwed up building some stuff. People did everything that right. They had their money on a cold wallet. They had their keys separate, the recovery phrase separate. And then somebody was able to use our good friend vibe coding, almost certainly, and they discovered that there was an issue. Now, I made a video about 4 or 5 months ago, I think, where I talked a little bit about the coming apocalypse of hacks in the cryptocurrency space. So I said, hey, we have Project Glasswing, and Project Glasswing was the shot heard around the world that vibe coding frameworks like Claude and GPT and their Chinese equivalents are basically able to just sit and scan something for a long period of time, do a lot of work, and then they'll just come up with a novel attack. And that attack can be by disassembling firmware, and that attack can be by scanning the blockchain and looking for a structural problem. That can be looking on GitHub, on cryptographic libraries, all kinds of stuff. It's able to do all those things. And I've had a lot of people reach out to me and they say, gosh, what do we do? How do I keep things safe and secure in 2026? All this software seems to be highly vulnerable, and everybody just seems to be bashing it apart. And so the purpose of this video is talk a little bit around it and reason about how to think about it for 2026 to keep things secure. So first, and by the way, Microsoft is retiring whiteboard. What is up with that, Microsoft? I'm gonna have to move to like Excalibur or something like that. Who knows? All right. So first off, you have to look at the most fundamental thing in our industry, which is value at risk. So what are we talking about in terms of the amount of funds? You have all these people that come at you and they say, oh gosh, what's the optimal wallet solution? Well, here's the thing. If I have $5 worth of ADA, that's a radically different situation than if I have $5 million worth of ADA. You're going to have very different storage solutions and security concepts based on these. Okay, so this is in the hot land. Okay, that's living on a browser-based wallet. That's living on your desktop. That's living on an exchange. Who really cares? It's $5 worth of ADA. Okay, bad things happen all the time. If you have $5 million, then you start thinking around, okay, what do I really need to do? And you kind of have two broad worlds you live in when you think about value at risk. There's self-custody and there is third party. Custody. Okay. So they have their trade-offs, and there's a whole bunch of philosophy behind them. So if you're in the Bitcoin world, the Bitcoiners, Team Orange, they basically said only real money is Bitcoin that is self-custodied. If you use a third-party custodian, it's not actually Bitcoin. You're not actually in control. They say not your keys, not your wallet. That's the Harkin philosophy they have. If you're in the enterprise world, almost always enterprises typically use specialized custodians, because what they want to do is manage risk. And you can talk about insurance, you can talk about all kinds of things. So there's a philosophical divide already there. And really, it comes down to value at risk. And we kind of philosophically understand that there's differences here. So this is kind of the meta when you think about all this stuff and you work your way through. So I'm going to show you guys a little something. This is a product, and I know the team behind the product, and they're good people. Let me just go ahead and bring it up. I actually bought one of these and beta tested them years ago, back in when we were first looking at lace. And since that time, I've bought more. So this is an example of a very well thought out ecosystem and product. And it really shows you, if you're going to go down the self-custody route, step by step, how to work your way through it. So first off, you have a hardware device. Okay, so you have this card, and it's made out of metal, and it's secure, and it's pretty tough. Okay, and so you have this card. It's a hardware device, and it's connected to your phone. Okay, so you have three-factor authentication. So you have this idea of a PIN code, something you know. You have a biometric lock, something you are. And then you have this card, something that you have. And the first thing you look for when you look at these hardware wallet solutions, these specialized devices, is you look for certifications. So this is EAL 6 Plus Secure. You'll see also other certifications like FIPS or these types of things. And this is actually manufactured by a publicly traded company, Compo Secure. And they're on the NASDAQ, and they've been around for a long time. And they make these specialized things for various government agencies and other such things. So first and foremost, if you look at this, there's a separation of the keys. The keys live in this Compo Secure EAL6 device, and then the access control. So that's already one trend that you look for a secure device. Okay, so we go back up here, and let me go ahead and open up my whiteboard again. All right, share screen. So one good design principle is typically there's three-factor authentication for spend/access control. Okay, so there's something you have. Okay, that's number one. There's something you know. Usually it's a password or a PIN code. That's number two. And there's something you are. And that's number three. Okay, so at my clinic, we had badges, we had a biometric, and then we had password. So you had three-factor authentication. And once you're logged in, then you can tap your badge to come in and again. But something you have, something you know, something you are. So that's kind of one design principle. And then you'll notice on the hardware side, there's this concept of certifications. So certifications are super important for hardware. What happens is that government agencies have to procure things for clearance work and for security, and they'll say, okay, well, we have various different certifications and certification levels. So let's look at EAL 6. Let's try to sort our way through it. EAL 6 certification. Okay, so our good friend Wikipedia, fake news. Evaluation assurance level, EAL 1 through 7 of an IT product or system is a numerical grade following the completion of a common criteria security evaluation by an international standard effect since 1999. And you have all the way up here to level 6. So this is a semi-formally verified, designed, and tested. EAL6 permits developers to gain high assurance from application of security engineering techniques to a rigorous development environment in order to produce a premium TOE for protecting high-value assets. And there's some things here, and there's some agency that stands behind it. And you can see it's really expensive to go through this EAL. You'll have other certifications as well. For example, FIPS, I believe it's FIPS 140. Cryptographic standards. So you'll have like FIPS 140-2, security requirement for cryptographic modules, and a litany of these other things. Okay, so certifications are another component of it. And it's not important to know all the certifications. It's more important to know that they exist and know that they're expensive and they're maintained by third parties. So, typically when you look at hardware, there's going to be some concept of a certification base. And what you can use is Dr. Claude or GPT to take you down the most common security certifications, what they mean, how often they go through. Any device, whether it be a YubiKey or, for example, the granddaddy of all of them. Let me show you guys this. It's called the CAC card. If any of you were in the military or the intelligence service or a government contractor, let me show you what the common access card is. This is how you get identified. And it's the bane of existence of anyone who's in the military or in the intelligence service is CAC cards, because there's always some damn issue with them and they don't work well. But any person who's there, basically they have this credit card size card and it's got a ICC in it. And so this is actually where the trusted credentials live. And then it's got a whole bunch of information to authenticate them. And then there's these concepts of CAC card readers. And then there's different types of the card based upon different classifications. And every agency has types of stuff like this. So this is an example of something that has some trusted execution in it. And basically there's a way of authenticating people. So typically in a clearance scanning, like a SCIF, you'll have a CAC card, and then you'll also have some form of biometric and a PIN code. So you have that 3-factor authentication. And these are built towards a specification. And there's a security hardening that they do there. So the first thing that you look for are certifications, who certifies, which government labs, and how often do you go through certification, and also the people who manufacture these things. Do they also manufacture these things for large institutions? Because those institutions are subject to a lot of attacks. And then you always have this concept of a 3-factor authentication, and you have CAC cards as an example. Okay, and a SCIF, sensitive compartmentalized information facility. And so to get into a SCIF, you have to have those 3 things, and a CAC card is the something you have component of it. Okay, so first step when you talk about self-custody, it's become cheap enough that for reasonable amounts of funds, and I would say greater than a few $1,000s, so $000, you pick that number. If you're going to self-custody, then at the very least, you should adopt a solution that's 3-factor authentication. So it has something you are, so there's a biometric side, something you know, typically a PIN card, and something you have, a device. So ledgers and Trezors can also fit under this. You have the device and you have the PIN code. It's good enough for government work. Okay, so ledgers, Trezors, the Arculus card is another example, and they're all going to carry certifications, and you're going to have things like EAL, you're going to have things like FIPS, and so forth. There's certification standards that exist there, and they basically say that the hardware has been checked pretty rigorously, and you can kind of get an understanding of how rigorous it has been. Now, when you start getting up to a larger amount, okay, so you go from thousands to millions, then you have to add on, if you're self-custodying, an extra layer. And that's typically what we like to call multimodal multisig. Okay, so multisig you're probably familiar with, M of N. Okay, so M key holders have to come together of the entire set, N key holders, and this gives you a thing. So like 3 of 5, for example. 3 of 5 people have to come in. So 3 people who have independent keys have to come together of 5 total, sign to initiate a transaction. Okay, why multimodal? Multimodal means that you use different infrastructure. So maybe one of the key holders is on a Trezor, a ledger, one's on a Trezor, and one's on that Arculus. Okay, so why? Because what if there's a flaw in the hardware for one of these things? Well, then, if the attacker gets it, they get one of the keys, but they don't get the other keys because the other keys are actually multimodal. To date, I'm not aware of any multimodal multisig using hardware as a backend that has been hacked successfully in the history of the entire cryptocurrency space. Maybe it has been, but typically that's social engineering or a smart contract flaw or infrastructure flaw, but it's typically not a flaw of the devices themselves because the cost and probability of all those systems being broken and vulnerable at the same time is simply just too high. Okay, so this is the gold standard, multimodal multisig. And I'm assuming that all of this does not require on-chain infrastructure. Okay, so there was a very famous bug in the parity ecosystem, the Polkadot ecosystem. That was about maybe 5 or 10 years ago. I'm getting old, so I can't remember exactly when, where there was a multi-sig smart contract on Ethereum and the contract got hacked. So if your multisig is constructed not just on devices, but the multisig is constructed or coordinated in a way in a smart contract, it may be the case that the smart contract gets hacked and it gets leaked. So it's very important that you understand, do these live completely off chain or on chain? Or is it a hybrid? So Bitcoin is completely off chain. A lot of Ethereum schemes involve an on chain construction. If it's on chain, the smart contract could potentially get hacked and create all kinds of chicanery and problems. So it's where are the assets custody? Do they belong to an address or do they belong to a smart contract? So step one, you always look at the value at risk, and then you're going to have a different security schema. If you're over X thousands of dollars, typically what you want is a 2 or 3 factor authentication component. And then what you're going to do is you're going to have some sort of hardware backbone, like an Arcuus or a Ledger or Treasure. You're looking for certified stuff that some government lab somewhere has basically said is certified. Then you feel good about it. But if you go to a large amount, you still want to self-custody, then you're going to have to build a multi-sig scheme, and it's got to be multimodal. And when it's multimodal, the chance of hacking that is quite low. Now, third-party custody, they do all of the above. They typically use multi-party computation, and they typically have a multimodal backend and social processes that are connected, and they have some concept of cold and hot storage. And some of the gold standards are like BitGo, for example. They're my personal favorite, and I've worked with them for a long, long time. Historical footnote, they were actually the ones who custodied the Cardano crowd sales Bitcoin. We had 108,000 Bitcoin that was in the BitGo account, and they controlled all of that and did a great job with it. So BitGo is one, Fireblocks, Copper. There's a lot of these professional custodians, and they have very specialized hardware to come in and play. Now, where does Midnight come into play with all of this? Because all of this pre-exists, and it's been around for a long time, and it's all there. Well, Midnight does something a little different, and Midnight is very special. So the problem is, number one, who owns these assets? It's kind of a silly question, right? So if you have Charles Hoskinson's bank account, I'm going to turn off this damn enhancing shape. Keeps spreading these. Charles Hoskinson bank account. Okay. And some person impersonates me and goes into one of the branches and is successfully able to withdraw $10,000. I call up and say, that was not me. What are you guys doing? You're dummies. Stop it. Okay. And they say, oh, there you go. All right. Well, then the bank recovers the money. Why? Because the account has the property of being owned by Charles Hoskinson. So now you have a Bitcoin address. Okay. So you have some sort of so you have this address. Does that address carry any owned by data with it? In the custody case, it does, because that's been attached by the custodian. You have a relationship with BitGo. They know that address belongs to you. But in the self-custody case, there's nothing to prove that. No third party can look at that and say, well, that definitively is your address. Because typically the things that give the hacker access to that address also gives them access to something related to the private credentials of the address. Okay. So typically the private key, they're able to regenerate or replicate that because they have to sign a transaction to move the funds out of that. Well, if they have that private key or they have some way of constructing that, they've taken from you, the owner of that address, the way that you would prove that you own the address. Now, there's some other things that come up, like the recovery keywords, and maybe we can come up with a zero knowledge proof or other things like that. One of the things about Midnight is we think about Midnight, it's really the square. It's hip to be square. Here's our square. So now it's a rectangle because it won't correct the shapes. And it's got those sides. It's got like privacy enhancing technology. We have abstraction, and we have agents. And what's that last part of the square? Oh, the last part is smart compliance. What smart compliance is talking about is the combination of these things so that you can add identity in a self-custody way called SSI, self-sovereign identity. You can add it in. So what you've done is you've separated identity from assets, but by doing so, what you can do is link them as a proof. So at the time of creation, what you can do is say, well, this address belongs to Charles Hoskinson. It's owned by. But because you have privacy, you can do it in a way that you can't see from the outside. But if the wallet ever gets compromised, because you've separated these credentials, you can prove that that wallet actually belonged to you. That's something very different from this world. This world is all about access control. That's what this world is about, access control. I'm trying to keep you out. I'm trying to only have authorized people use this. This world is about recovery. This world is about saying, okay, what happens when something bad has happened? How do those people get their money back? How do they prove that they were the owners? Well, you do that by linking identity to an asset. But why don't you want to do that in a blockchain space? Because you don't have privacy. It's a dystopian hellscape. There's no concept of privacy with identity. Currently in the banking system, it's all third-party custody. So there's no concept of an anonymous banking account at Wells Fargo. It's Charles Hoskinson's bank account. And I can't have this anonymous account. Well, what if it could be anonymous to Wells Fargo, but if some bad thing happens, then I can go and show up and prove that I'm the owner of the account and that thing is wrong. That's called what? Selective disclosure. Now, the other thing that Midnight brings into play is that typically you as a user over here, when you talk about access control, you have access control to generating this and generating the keywords. Usually that's called BIP39, and you get 24 keywords. Okay. And you'll have a multisig usually with your cryptocurrency, but the top shelf stuff, the good shit, belongs to the custodians, the multi-party computation stuff. And it's bespoke. They build it internally, they use it in their wallets, and it's part of their secret sauce of being able to do custodial stuff. Because in a world of abstraction, guess what? You're going to read and write to more than 100 blockchains regularly. Well, this is one of the pillars of Midnight. In addition to having zero knowledge, in addition to having trusted execution environments to play around with, we also have multi-party computation. And that's part of the kit. So if you have the ability to separate identity from the assets, but then have provable linkage when you want to as a selective disclosure, you also can add heavier techniques like multi-party computation into your system. So you can have one universal credential, and then you can have third parties actually manage it. So you have a hybrid model where it's self-custody, but you have the abilities of a third-party custodian that come in. So you have heavier crypto that you're actually able to use with the system. Much, much heavier crypto for the system. So Midnight brings into bear a lot more tools in the box to enhance access control, but then also to facilitate recovery when things go wrong. Why? Because right now, the trust model for these guys is trust us because we've been around for a long time. Trust us because we have open source code. Trust us because we have certifications. But what happens when something blows up? They say, well, that's your problem. We're not liable. It's a non-custodial wallet. Well, I'd love to have insurance like an FDIC. It's great for consumer protection. And you can sign up for a monthly policy. And if something happens, you get your crypto back. I can't do that unless I know who you are and you can consent to something. But the minute you do that in a legacy system, you lose your privacy forever because your coins are publicly linked to that account. You do that in a ZK system, they're not. So you can actually get an insurance policy. And when bad things happen, you can show up and say, actually, that was me. And I did not authorize that movement of assets for when these big hacks happen. So there's no silver bullet, but really it always comes down to value at risk. And there's kind of, this is part of the meta crypto. You're asking questions like, do you have the right environment? Do you have the right skills? Do you have the right hardware? Do you have the right knowledge? All these types of things, knowledge and skills, hardware, environment. Do you have these things? Okay. And what are we talking about here? Are we talking about $5, $5,000, $5 million? And as you go up the chain, you have to change your strategy. And you have to say, okay, I have to go from a hot wallet sitting in a browser to some sort of hardware solution to a multimodal solution. There's no exceptions to this. And if you do that, you'll never lose your money, or it's very rare. And one thing we haven't talked about, we talked a little bit about recovery, but how do you recover when you lose? Because bad things happen. You get in a car accident, your wife needs to get access to the crypto. You develop Alzheimer's, you forgot all your passwords and other things like that. Well, this is where third-party services come in. Instead of doing custody, they do recovery. So you have people like Turnkey, for example. You have the social recovery that we developed with Algorand Hedera and others. It's called DREC. Okay. So there's all kinds of things. The security of these systems is like a chain. This can be steel reinforced titanium super tungsten alloy thingamabob, and this can be tin. Obviously not the same. And guess what? We tug at it with a lot of force, lots of newtons, tons of force. So all these other links can be good, break. So you can have this incredible multimodal multisig, but if you have a recovery solution that's very weak, maybe there's a way to penetrate the system. You can have all the off-chain stuff be super strong, but like the Polkadot case, the on-chain stuff gets hacked. Security is only as good as the chain. And this is where AI is destroying us right now. These AI systems are super good because they're patient at watching the chain. And they're really drilling into it and they're really thinking about it. And they look at each link inside the chain and they're like, okay, well, that link's good. That link's good. That link's good. Oh, no, there's this little thing here. And boom, the minute that you break the chain, whole thing falls apart. So if it's not the pseudo random number generator, maybe it's something else. And a human being, they just have finite resources because to attack something, the attacker has to have the knowledge and the desire. These are not symmetric things. The set of desire to attack things, very big, very big. They want to get your money, and there's millions of these people. The set of people with the knowledge to break complex cryptography, very small. So even if all these systems are vulnerable all the way through, guess what? The overlap of these two is just one little small part. So are they going to go break your $5,000 cryptocurrency wallet, risk a felony and all this other stuff for that? No. They're going to go after really valuable stuff. But guess what AI did? They made these sets symmetric. Now the knowledge is outsourced to AI, so the entire world of desire can now hack. And it has unlimited patience. You can just sit and turn on Daybreak or your favorite InfoSec system, and you can say, read the whole chain. So you'll say the obvious stuff, software vulnerabilities, firmware vulnerabilities, look at the chip design, all kinds of things, run all these different probes, these types of things. And guess what? Goes on and on and on and on and on and on and on. And the whole thing falls apart. So that's a big problem. That's why you see so many of these hacks happening, and they're growing. So the only way you really can defend yourself is to go multimodal, use multisig for long-term custody if you're going to self-custody, or use a third-party custodian that has a good reputation, it's been around for a while. If you're going to self-custody, then 3 factors, the gold standard, and then typically you're looking for certifications combined with being open source. That's my preference for the two, and they've been around for a while. And then typically that'll help you out. Understand that each cryptocurrency is a little different. And when you have things like Midnight, we can add a new layer here, and we can start talking about recovery and insurance. And then you can start talking about linkage of the identity and the address together. So you can get back to this model that we have in the legacy world. And it makes things a little bit better and allows larger marketplaces to come. And plus you have higher order multi-party computation. Environments are super important, by the way. Are you a Windows user? Are you a Mac user? Are you using an iPhone, using an Android? What is your driver's environment? And do you feel really comfortable that environment's secure? Are you really comfortable you don't have somebody who can sneak on in and steal your stuff? Do you have the skills to lock down your compute system, especially given that asymmetry has been plugged? What's your knowledge base there? If you don't, well, then you need to buy a new environment. That's really where the hardware wallet is so powerful. Technically speaking, you can replicate the entire capability of a hardware wallet by booting into a laptop that's network is turned off using a memory-only operating system like Tails or something like that. And preloading it with the wallet and then doing an offline transaction, putting it on a flash drive and porting it over. That's a lot of work. And that's why most people use ledgers and Trezors and these types of things, right? And then the hardware can also have a lot of capabilities built into it. But then also your recovery solution is super important for how your keys are backed up. One of the things we did with Lace is we talked about a PGP paper wallet. In fact, to showcase how secure a PGP paper wallet is, all of you have access to a wallet that I put $1 million in. Let me show you a little something. Let's see, our PGP paper wallet, $1 million, Charles Hoskinson X. So I did this back in 2020, and let's see here. Let me see if they actually linked it. Yeah, here we go. Let me find it for you guys. I'll just go to X real quick. I think the tweet is still up. I'll go to my Twitter. So this, if you can hack it, you can keep it. This was my paper wallet. So this is actually my backup for my wallet. It's all there. You guys can see it. It's PGP encrypted. And this is my favorite feature that we did for Lace. Basically, we created a generator, those 24 keywords that normally you write down and you put them in a safe and you keep them secure. What we did instead is you can generate it, encrypt it with a PGP key, and then when you print it out, you print out the post-encrypted file, so it stalls the printer replay attack. But actually, I used Twitter as my backup solution because I have the PGP key. If I ever lost my wallet, I can just go to my Twitter feed, go to my tweet where I tweeted this out. And this was the tweet right here. And there we go. And you can put $1 million on that. We even had a competition. If you could hack it, you can keep it. Put $1 million into a wallet, and no one was able to claim it for that. So recovery matters a lot, and this is the back door into your thing. So that's one of those links on the chain. Is if you lose your system, how do you recover the system? And you either have a third party do this on your behalf, or you can have a self-custody solution, and you separate concerns, and you have one place you go to use it, one place you go to recover it, and you put them somewhere. Now, if someone breaks into the house, breaks into the safe, this is what they get. They get this paper wallet here that's printed. It looks awfully official, but when they scan it, they can't recover it because they don't have the PGP key that's associated with it. Sucks to be them, you see. So I hope this conveys to you that this is a very complex ecosystem. And the first thing that people do when people lose money is they blame the victim. And they say, oh, well, that victim didn't know what they were doing. They're incompetent. I'm super special and super capable. Well, these people in this particular wallet hack, they were using hardware wallets that they thought were secure, and they did everything in their power, and they backed up the keywords, and they left it in a safe. They didn't touch it for 5 years, and all their money was taken. And they're thinking it's a hardware wallet, it's offline, the keys have never been used online, they only live on this device, it's secure. They're thinking that. And then a new adversarial capability comes, and then suddenly it goes from this world of concern to this world of concern, and all their money is lost. It's not the victim's fault, guys. Crypto can't get to 5 billion people and be the world money system unless we have a better way of thinking about access control. We have a better meta skill of how to help people figure out what they actually need. We have more realistic and reasonable and scalable flow between third-party custody and self-custody. And we also have the ability to recover when bad things happen for people. And once you have that, then you have a holistic money system. By the way, the most popular form of custody is third-party custody. You know what it is? It's the exchange. We told people for years and years, now I've been around for 15 years, and I told people, don't leave your money on the exchange. And yet 80% of cryptocurrency users do, because they're thinking, okay, well, the exchange is probably pretty secure. It's two-factor authentication. They're probably going to do a better job of holding it than I am, especially the big guys like the Binances and the Coinbases, because they even have their own custody solutions. So the exchange ends up being the third-party custodian inadvertently, which is why there's so much ADA and there's so much NIGHT and so much Bitcoin and so much Ether and other things that are on the exchanges. How do you get out of it? You make self-custody easier, and it's not very easy when the hardware guys are getting hacked. And you need disaster recovery, and you need all kinds of things to come in, and you need to be able to link identity to it. So we're working on some technologies on the Midnight side to make this really easy. One is called Midnight Passport. And really it is the meat and potatoes of this whole question. And obviously there's third-party hardware that exists in the entire place. But the gold standard's multimodal, multisig. Different ways of deriving, all off-chain and multisig. Never gets hacked. Real hard, real expensive to do, which is why typically it's for the big money. And when you're in the smaller side, yeah, a hardware wallet is the way to go. The only way we're really going to get out of this completely is we have to link it with insurance. And then once we have those two things, then no matter what, you're going to have a much better story about the usability of the system. The other thing about insurance is insurance forces standards. Are you going to go ahead and insure everybody's wallet No, there has to be some rules behind who qualifies and who doesn't qualify. I'll insure Ledger and Trezor because they've been around for a long time and they know what they're doing. Am I going to insure some mom and pop small thing that really doesn't have any certifications and they haven't been around for a while and I'm not really sure about their infosec? No. So insurance forces the market to start picking winners and losers and picking standards. And in the process of doing that, it actually massively enhances the quality. Because if you don't have standards, you can't measure the risk. If you can't measure the risk, you can't price it. So you can't sell insurance to people. So that's another food for thought, is that identity linked to wallets, if you have privacy, it's compatible with self-custody, gives you the ability then to create decentralized insurance. Decentralized insurance creates standards, which strengthens the entire chain for the entire industry and protects all of us. And the consumer now has something they've never had before. Like the attacker, the consumer also has Dr. Claude. They have the ability to ask questions to AI as well and say, here's my situation. What's the best way to handle all of this? And Claude's going to look at your value at risk. It's going to think around your lifestyle, ask you a bunch of questions, and then spit out an answer. Maybe it's right, maybe it's wrong. It's the same kind of spit out that the guys over here are getting that are attacking you with. So you can use it to pen test your infrastructure and think around it. Highly recommend you brainstorm with it. AI's garbage in, garbage out. It's only as good as what you ask it and what your expectations are. From our side, this is the 4th generation. And I like to call it the consumer generation. The consumer. This is the generation that's going to make cryptocurrencies worth $10 trillion. And this is a generation that's going to bring in billions of people, the everyday people in. Why? Because we can start protecting them in ways that we've protected people before. And also we have many more tools in our box. The vast majority of new wallets are going to be agentic wallets. You won't even hold your assets. And the OWS standard is one example of that, the open wallet standard, the OWS. Smart compliance, identity linkage. Having PET means you can add a whole bunch of extra things, and abstraction means that you can pick the best area and spend in using MPC and read from using ZK, the other thing. So you can pick ledgers that are the safest to custody on, as opposed to ones that have inherent vulnerabilities in their system, including post-quantum. Just food for thought. So, a quick 42-minute video. Come to expect that from me. It's the same story, just told in a different way every few years. I am sorry to the people who lost their money in this hardware wallet hack. That's a really tough one. It's usually something like Second Five, where somebody screwed up on a cryptographic library and money gets stolen from something that's hot. Getting stolen from a hardware wallet, that's just brutal. That's a bitter pill to swallow. But it really does show you the value of multimodal approach, and it shows you the value of 3-factor authentication, and it shows you the value of certifications and these types of things. They keep you out of trouble and they keep you honest. It makes things slower and it makes things more expensive, but ultimately it's always about the same. The value at risk, the value at risk, the value at risk. And how much money is at risk? If it's $500, it's very different than $5,000. Very different than $50,000. And let's be reasonable about it. Would you walk around a dangerous area of town with $50,000 in cash publicly visible? Probably not. You would be a lot more sensible about it. Well, analogously, would you leave $50,000 in a not very secure interface? So you have to think carefully about these things. And then you also have to say, do you want to absolutely trust one company that suffers no downside when they're wrong 100% of the time? And you'd say no. You say, okay, well, multimodal then. You have to have multisig in multiple companies. And you can have semi-custodial arrangements and all kinds of things. And do you have the knowledge to do that? If the answer is no, then you need to outsource it and find somebody who does. And you have to pay them a service fee to help you out. And then you have to use basic diligence. And Dr. Claude can help you kind of navigate all of that. So So that's all I have to say about this topic. We'll keep innovating. Midnight Passport, we're making great progress on, and Midnight as a whole, we're building it up. And OWS is now integrated into Midnight. I'll show you guys that real quickly, by the way. OWS is one of my favorite things. Dun, dun, dun. We got to get ourselves up on the website, by the way, because we're now there. It's got to get that little Cardano logo. So here's the Open Wallet Standard. And basically what it does is it puts together a whole stack. Look at all these things. X402, Privy, Coinbase Agent, Keystore, the W3C Universal Wallet, Turnkey, Lit Protocol, Wallet Connect V2, Crossmint, ERC 4337, the CAP standards, the Solana Wallet standard, all together into one protocol stack. And it gives you the ability to give your agent a wallet and connect to all the other things. And so Cardano now supports this. We integrated it in. Here's all the different people that support it: Polygon and Sui and Uniblock and Filecoin and Tron and Arbitrum and OKX and others. It was lovely people at Wing Riders that did the integration. We said, hey, we need to get into this and get it done. We just got to get our logo up on there. So I'll get a ping Jer for it. So yeah, OWS is real cool. And we built this so that agents can have wallets, because once they have wallets, then they can trade. They can do other things. So Midnight City is our first touch point that we built for this. And we're adding a bunch of things. And Patrick has been a huge proponent of getting Cardano into X402. I believe Cardano Foundation's joined the X402 Foundation. So we have payments protocol to pair with this. By 2030, the vast majority of cryptocurrency wallets will be primarily custodied by an agent. And that agent will have a probably operate in a trusted execution environment. It's called confidential compute. In fact, we work with, let me show you this. The Confidential Compute Consortium. So some of the largest companies in the world got together and they said, you know what? We need to have standards for how the hardware is going to work, the network is going to work to store valuable data. So, if you take a look at the Confidential Compute Consortium, you can see AMD and Google, Huawei, Intel, Meta, Microsoft, NVIDIA. These are kind of big companies, right? And Shielded. Who the hell is Shielded? It's my company. That's the development company building Midnight. So we all got together with all these other big companies, and Near Protocol is right there because they're pretty smart too. And we've been thinking very carefully about how we're going to build out a framework, because by 2029, $50 billion a year of computation loads are going to be through confidential compute. So right now they're thinking, I'm going to give the AI a bunch of stuff in Azure or Amazon, or one of these guys is going to operate on all those things. But long term, we're thinking, okay, well, the agent is going to run in this confidential compute cluster. It's going to have its own wallet. It's going to be spending your money. So how do I make sure that that's not stolen by the person hosting the agent? The same question of how do I not steal your data? So it has to be processed and safe at rest and in processing. So we've been thinking very holistically with a lot of big companies about how to put all these different things together. And the good news is the hardware is moving in this direction. Everything is getting trusted hardware. It's being built by the largest, most profitable companies in the world. And we can piggyback on the AI revolution. And that's going to add a new dimension to the cryptocurrency security thing. So instead of custodying on an exchange or a third-party custodian, you may be able to custody with an agent running an agentic hardware. And if you put the right cryptography inside of it, it's basically like a multimodal multisig. So pretty cool stuff. All right. So anyway, guys, thank you so much for listening. I'll clip it here. I hope you have a wonderful day. Cheers.